Most men walk blindly into a relationship, never realizing they're being studied, scanned, and evaluated from the very first moment they say hello. Not just for charm or looks, but for emotional strength, consistency, and boundaries. She might smile at you, laugh at your jokes, seem like she's genuinely enjoying herself, but underneath the surface, her subconscious mind is running a full diagnostic on your masculinity. She's testing without calling it a test. She notices how fast you respond to texts. She pays attention to whether you flinch when she talks about her ex. She sees how you handle lateness, teasing, or little jabs. And while she does this instinctively, without malice or even awareness, most men are completely oblivious to what's going on. You're too distracted by the attention to realize that you're being tested. And worse, you're failing those tests, silently, repeatedly, without even knowing what went wrong. But what's truly destructive isn't the testing itself. It's that men have no counterbalance. While women are evaluating every micro-behavior, you're just happy to be there. You're so relieved to get a response, a number, a second date, that you never pause to ask, who is this person? What kind of energy is she bringing into my life? What kind of storm might I be walking into? You've been trained to believe that any female attention is better than none, that questioning her behavior, calling out disrespect, or even walking away is somehow losing. But the truth is brutal. If you don't learn how to test her, calmly, silently, strategically, then you'll keep falling into traps designed by your ignorance. Not because you're a bad man, but because you're entering blind while she's already played this game before. Every little action she takes, from minor drama to emotional withdrawal, is her way of measuring your strength. Not physical strength, but psychological firmness. Can you stay calm in her storm? Do you have standards you won't break? Can you say no without guilt? See, when she shows up late, it's not random. It's a boundary test. When she talks about another guy, it's not carelessness. It's an emotional probe. When she accuses you of not caring enough, out of nowhere, that's not genuine concern. It's a turbulence test to see if you'll crumble or stay composed. And here's where most men fail. Not because they're weak, but because they think the way to win her heart is to be endlessly agreeable, to accommodate, to reassure, to chase. But biology doesn't reward appeasement. It rewards strength. And women feel this on a visceral level, even if they can't explain it. When you over-explain, over-invest, or over-commit too early, she starts pulling back. Not because she's cruel, but because her instincts tell her, this one folds too easily. So, if the first rule is learning how women test, the second is learning how to hold the line without flinching. That's the difference between respect and rejection. But before you can test her, you need to know what you're even looking for. Because not all women test the same, and not all tests come from a healthy place. There are 5 types you must watch for, the ones that can quietly destroy your life if you don't spot them early. The first is the emotional bomb. This woman turns every small disagreement into a volcanic eruption. A look, a tone, a delayed reply. Anything can set her off. She doesn't argue, she detonates. One moment she's crying, the next she's screaming, and you have no idea what just happened. You find yourself apologizing for things you didn't even do, just to restore peace. Over time, your nervous system breaks down. You're constantly scanning for danger, anticipating her next meltdown, living in a state of emotional hypervigilance. That's not love, that's trauma bonding, and it only gets worse. Then there's the validation vampire. She looks beautiful. She knows how to draw you in. But what you don't see at first is that her self-worth is paper thin. She needs you to constantly reaffirm her value. If you get busy, distracted, or God forbid, stop complimenting her for a few hours, she'll provoke an argument, pull away, or accuse you of not being invested. What she's doing is pulling your energy away from your purpose and toward her emotional maintenance. You're not her man. You're her emotional crutch. And no matter how much you give, it's never enough. The third is the controller. She doesn't start by barking orders. She starts with suggestions. You shouldn't hang out with him. He's a bad influence. That job doesn't suit you. I just think we'd be happier if we did things my way. Slowly, you find yourself adjusting, compromising, and changing who you are to avoid conflict. Then one day, You look in the mirror and realize you're living her life, not yours. The fourth is the entitled princess. She believes her existence alone is a gift. She expects you to take her out, plan everything, pay for everything, and shower her with attention while she gives you presents. Not supported, not love, just presents. If you dare ask for anything in return, she'll make you feel like you're the selfish one. Relationships for her are a one-way street. You give, she takes, and gratitude never enters the equation. Then we have the chaos creator. This woman is addicted to drama like it's heroin. When things are calm, she gets nervous. When you're happy, she feels unseen. So she manufactures problems, picks fights, or invents stories just to spark emotional intensity. You think if you just fix the current issue, things will get better, but they never do, because she doesn't want a resolution. She wants chaos, and the moment you give her peace, she starts looking for the next fire to start. These are the women you must test for, not to judge, not to punish, but to protect yourself. Because once you're in too deep, logic fades, and emotion takes over. And when that happens, it doesn't matter how smart you are, you'll rationalize everything. You'll tell yourself she's just passionate, insecure, or needs healing. But what you're doing is betraying your clarity. That's why testing is not a game. It's not about manipulation. It's about discernment. It's about observing how she handles reality, not fantasy. How does she react to delayed gratification? How does she respond to a boundary? How does she behave when things don't go her way? You don't need to trap her. You don't need to provoke her. You just need to be still, firm, and clear, and let her reveal herself. Most men think testing a woman means playing games, like showing less interest, pretending to be busy, or using manipulative tricks to see how she reacts. But that's not testing. That's insecurity dressed up as strategy. Real testing isn't about control. It's about clarity. You're not trying to manipulate her behavior. You're watching how she naturally responds to the truth of who you are. You're observing how she handles tension, how she responds to leadership, and whether she can respect boundaries that are calmly but firmly set. You're gathering data, not to dominate, but to decide. Because here's the truth. You don't know a woman until you see how she handles not getting her way. It's easy to be sweet when everything's going smoothly. But what happens when you say no? What happens when you change plans last minute? What happens when you ask her to put in effort, even just a little? Does she pout? Withdraw? Guilt trip you? Or does she rise to the occasion with maturity and presence? This is the power of what I call silent evaluation. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You just create small, natural moments where she has the opportunity to show you who she is. Not through her words, but through her patterns. Let's start with one of the most powerful. The respect test. This isn't complicated. You make a small, reasonable request, something simple that requires just a bit of effort on her part. You suggest a time and place that works better for your schedule. You ask her to bring something to the date. You tell her you'll meet near your gym or office instead of driving 45 minutes to her side of town. Now observe. Does she cooperate easily? Or does she act like you've just asked her for a kidney? This test reveals everything about her frame of mind. Is she coming into this dynamic as a partner or as a prize to be worshipped? A genuinely interested woman will naturally want to meet you halfway. She'll match your effort, accommodate your reality, and even offer more than what was asked. But the one who expects you to bend every time? That's not a partner. That's a consumer. The second test is the flexibility test. You don't do this by being unreliable. You do it by simply observing how she handles change. You shift plans when something more important comes up. You offer an alternative to what she expected. You take the lead and reroute the situation to better fit your pace. Now pay close attention. Does she roll with it? Smile? Adapt? And stay connected? Or does she sulk, complain, or make it about herself? Life is unpredictable. You want a woman who can walk through that with grace, not a walking tantrum who collapses under inconvenience. Because what seems like a small rigidity early on, like being fussy about dinner plans, will one day become a screaming match about life's deeper uncertainties. If she can't handle a surprise text delay, how will she handle a crisis? A job change? A death in the family? This test isn't about schedules. It's about emotional resilience. Then we have the investment test. Most men never give a woman the space to invest in them. They pay for everything, plan everything, and decide everything, thinking they're showing leadership. But true leadership includes inviting her to contribute. A simple shift, like asking her to choose the restaurant, plan the next outing, or bring a bottle of wine to your place, can tell you exactly what role she sees herself playing in this connection. Does she light up at the chance to co-create something meaningful? Or does she hesitate, stall, or look confused that she's even being asked to participate? This test is critical, because a woman who refuses to invest early will expect you to carry the emotional, financial, and logistical burden forever. She's not looking for a man. She's looking for a concierge. And once she knows you'll do everything just to keep her around, she'll stop appreciating any of it. That leads us to the fourth test, the boundary test. Now this one is subtle. You don't need to lecture her. You don't need to make dramatic speeches. You simply express something clearly and calmly. Maybe you let her know you don't text during work hours, or that you prefer to take things slow physically, or that you don't cancel gym days for last-minute plans. Something small, simple, but firm. Then you wait. Does she honor that? Or does she push? Negotiate? Try to wear you down with charm or pressure? You're not testing her reaction. You're testing her respect for your autonomy. A woman who understands boundaries, especially early on, is a woman who has boundaries herself. She doesn't just expect respect, she gives it. But the woman who tries to bend your rules immediately, that's the same woman who will one day try to bend your identity. Now, all of this brings us to the deeper layer. How do you interpret her response? Because not all yes responses are equal, and not all no responses are bad. Here's what to look for. High-interest women with good character will not only respect your requests, they'll exceed them. If you ask her to meet halfway, she'll offer to drive the full distance. If you say you're focused on work, she won't just back off. She'll encourage you. If you express a preference, she'll take it seriously. And most importantly, she'll contribute to the interaction without needing to be reminded or rewarded. Her actions say, "I value you." And she shows that value by giving you peace, not pressure. Moderate interest women will comply with your standards, but they won't volunteer anything extra. They'll follow the rules if you enforce them, but they'll test the edges if you don't. They're not malicious, but they're not committed either. These women are often juggling options. They're not sure if you're the one yet, so their investment reflects that uncertainty. They'll do what's required, but nothing more. Low-interest women will resist, complain, or avoid your requests entirely. They'll forget, stall, or get passive-aggressive. They expect you to do all the heavy lifting, and if you don't, they withdraw. Their attitude is, "Why should I put in effort for someone I'm not sure about?" But they'll happily soak up your energy while they evaluate other options. These women often present as sweet at first, but once you stop chasing, their interest vanishes. And then there's the explosive response. When you set a basic boundary and she erupts, gets offended, emotional, or even accuses you of being cold or arrogant, you've just met a red flag wrapped in lip gloss. That's not miscommunication, that's entitlement. And if you don't walk away now, you'll spend the next few years explaining why it's okay for you to have your thoughts, your own needs, your own space. These tests don't just reveal interest. They reveal emotional maturity, capacity for love, and respect for masculine energy. And the longer you avoid giving these tests, the more likely you are to fall for someone who looks good but treats you badly. Because here's the brutal truth. Most men never test. Not because they don't know how, but because they're afraid of losing the woman. They fear that if they draw a line, she'll walk. If they make a request, she'll disappear. So they settle. They accommodate. They tolerate. And in doing so, they betray their standards for a chance at short-term connection. But a connection without respect is prison. That's why testing is freedom. It frees you from illusions. It frees you from desperation. It frees you from wasting months or years on someone who was never capable of loving you in the first place. And when done right, testing doesn't repel high-quality women. It attracts them. Because deep down, women want to be with a man who isn't afraid to walk away. A man who holds himself to a higher standard. A man who doesn't just talk about value, but lives it. Every woman, whether she admits it or not, is placing you into a category from the very beginning. Not with words, but with behavior. With how she speaks to you, how she touches you, and how much effort she puts into connecting. And what determines which category you land in, whether she sees you as a provider, a source of validation, or a lover, is not your looks, your income, or your car. It's how you handle those silent tests. It's how you respond when she pushes, when she withholds, when she asks you to sacrifice your standards for her comfort. Let's break down what these categories mean, because understanding them is the key to flipping the dynamic and stepping into your power. First, there's the provider track. This is the man she sees as stable, generous, and easy to control. He pays for everything. He plans everything. He adjusts everything around her. And in return, she withholds affection, sex, and emotional intimacy because she knows she doesn't have to give more. He'll keep chasing. He'll keep proving himself. He's not being rewarded. He's being used. And the sad part is, he thinks if he just gives more, sacrifices more, she'll finally choose him. But she won't. Because in her mind, he's already been filed under resource, not romance. Then there's the validation track. She doesn't need your money. She needs your energy. She wants your compliments, your attention, your emotional labor. But when you ask for a connection in return, she suddenly needs space. She flirts just enough to keep you on the hook, but never gives you the real thing. And yet, she's always happy to hear from you, because your presence confirms she's still desirable. You're not a man to her. You're a mirror. And the moment you stop reflecting admiration, she ghosts you for someone new. But the one you want, the one you must become, is the lover track. The man she sees as rare, valuable, and worth pursuing. This man doesn't chase. He observes. He doesn't overgive. He offers clarity. And because he's selective, she treats him with reverence. She makes an effort. She respects his boundaries. She shows up on time. She initiates contact. She invests. Because she knows, consciously or not, that men like him don't come around often. The lover doesn't beg for attention. He attracts it. He doesn't compete for validation. He inspires it. His presence speaks louder than any strategy. But most men never make it into that category. Why? Because they're terrified of losing even mediocre attention. Because they're operating from a scarcity mindset, the belief that if they don't lock her down now, they'll never find another chance. And that belief makes you weak. It makes you ignore red flags. It makes you overlook disrespect. It makes you rationalize bad behavior just because she's attractive or nice sometimes. You start telling yourself things like, she's just going through something, or I'm probably overthinking it. But deep down you feel it. Something's off. Something's draining you. And still, you stay. Because you've convinced yourself this is as good as it gets. That's the lie you have to break. Because when you start thinking abundantly, when you internalize that there are thousands, even millions of women out there who would love to share your life, you stop tolerating nonsense. You stop chasing chaos. You stop betraying yourself for the promise of companionship. And that shift changes everything. Women can feel it instantly. When a man is no longer afraid to walk away, his energy becomes magnetic, not cocky, not aggressive, just sovereign. Women will test you less, respect you more, and invest at levels you never thought possible. Not because you're tricking them, but because you're showing them that your time is sacred. And in today's world, that mindset isn't optional, it's necessary. Because the dating landscape has changed. The social structures that once kept relationships balanced, family, tradition, and shame, have collapsed. And now, we're living in a system where women face fewer consequences for bad behavior, while men face higher costs for choosing wrong. Social media has given every woman a feedback loop of infinite validation. Dating apps have created the illusion of endless options. Cultural narratives have encouraged women to never settle, while shaming men for having standards at all. And in this chaos, the man who doesn't test, who doesn't vet, who doesn't say no, gets chewed up and spit out. He gets exploited, lied to, emotionally drained, financially used. And when he finally wakes up, he's lost years and sometimes even himself. That's why testing isn't about being clever. It's about survival. Because some patterns, once you let them into your life, will dismantle you from the inside out. Let's talk about those patterns. Cluster B personality traits: borderline, narcissistic, histrionic, or antisocial behaviors. Don't just create tension, they create chaos. These women often appear intoxicating at first, intense, passionate, magnetic. But over time, you realize you're not in love. You're in a psychological war zone. Every conversation is a landmine. Every disagreement escalates into emotional destruction. And no matter how much love, patience, or support you give, it's never enough. These patterns rarely improve. They intensify, especially under stress. Then there's the victim mentality. This woman never takes responsibility. Every ex was abusive. Every job was unfair. Every problem is someone else's fault. And in the beginning, you'll want to help. You'll want to fix it. But eventually, you become the new villain in her story. She'll blame you for her moods, her failures, and her bad choices. You go from rescuer to scapegoat. And if you don't walk away, she'll drain your soul trying to fix a life she refuses to own. Next, addiction issues. And this isn't just drugs or alcohol. It's social media, attention, shopping, gambling, any pattern where short-term pleasure overrides long-term growth. If she's checking her phone every 30 seconds, comparing herself to influencers, or can't go a day without dopamine hits, you're not building a future. You're babysitting an addict. And until she gets real help, you'll always come second to her compulsion. And we can't ignore financial irresponsibility. If she treats your money like monopoly cash, if she's constantly treating herself with nothing in savings, if she expects you to fund her lifestyle without contributing to yours, understand this: her dysfunction will become your burden. One wrong relationship can bankrupt you emotionally and literally. And in a world where men are legally liable for women's choices in marriage, you can't afford to ignore these signs. Finally, family dysfunction. If she comes from deep generational trauma, broken homes, toxic parents, abuse, and she hasn't done serious inner work, she'll unconsciously recreate that chaos with you. Not because she wants to, but because it's familiar. That's how her nervous system was wired. And unless she's actively healing, your love won't save her. It'll just get consumed in the fire of unresolved pain. This is why your standards must be non-negotiable. You don't lower them because you're lonely. You don't ignore red flags because she's pretty. You don't compromise your values because she gives you attention. Testing isn't about her. It's about protecting your peace. And that brings us to the final layer. The deep tests. The ones that go beyond scheduling and effort. The ones that reveal who she is when no one's watching. The service test. How does she treat waiters, cashiers, janitors, people who offer her nothing? That's her real personality. If she's rude to strangers one day, that cruelty will be directed at you. The stress test. Watch how she reacts when plans fall apart. Does she adapt, problem solve, or blame and collapse? Life will throw chaos at you, so her reaction matters more than her beauty. The gratitude test. You give, you support, you show up. Does she say thank you? Does she acknowledge the effort? Or does she act like it's owed? Gratitude isn't optional. It's the foundation of love. The contribution test. What does she bring to your life besides attraction? Peace, kindness, support, or just demands and complaints? You're not a utility. You're a man, and you deserve someone who adds to your world. The loyalty test. When you're not around, how does she talk about you? With admiration or criticism? Does she defend your name or drag it? You'll never hear everything she says, but if you catch even one glimpse of disloyalty, believe it. Because here's the brutal truth. Most men will hear all this, nod, agree, and still fail. Not because they don't understand, but because they're afraid. Afraid to walk away. Afraid to be alone. Afraid that if they enforce standards, they'll never find someone again. But you're not most men. You're building a different kind of life now. One where your peace matters more than her approval. One where your clarity matters more than her curves. One where your self-respect isn't for sale at the price of a text back or a second date. When you test with courage, you attract with power. Because the man who holds the line becomes the man she can finally trust, and the man she must earn. And that's when everything changes.